and welcome to this second event on quantum computing and financial services. My name is Francesco Pisani, and I will have the honor to accompany you in these 2 hours that are going to be about amazing insights provided by our guests, and also you will have the chance to interact with them. So today we will have representatives from universities, representatives from established companies, innovation hub and startups talking about what the latest accomplishments or what the latest expectations for quantum computing and financial services are. And once again, please do not miss the chance to interact with them. First of all, before we move on into the topic, I would like to thank all the parties that have contributed to the organization of this event. And of course, next to EY, there are, of course, IBM and TechQuartier who are the co-organizer of it. And having said that, I would like to give immediately the word to Peter Noy, Managing Director of TechQuartier, for his welcome note. Peter, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Francesco. Very glad to be here, and also welcome from our side at the heart of Frankfurt, TechQuartier. I would like to give you a short intro what the TechQuartier is about and why we organized this event. Yeah, the TechQuartier is a community-based ecosystem platform and startup hub, and we are moving forward with taking trends and building with our community interesting platforms, discussions around these trends, and really putting this forward to the next level. Yeah, and having said this, it's very clear that quantum computing is at the very beginning of, very edge of this, and we're moving forward with this. And this is already the second time that we have an event with IBM and EY and other US Quantum, and I'm very glad about this. And what is the reason why we're doing this? The reason is that we want to build a platform and a community to really discuss what are the questions in quantum computing and finance. Yeah, I think what the need for the startups and also for the other participants is not so much the education. There has been much around this. The issue is really what are relevant use cases in your future. What can be problems which can be solved with this technology, and to build a floor to discuss these matters. And for that reason, we also incorporated high performance computing. And since we believe that in the future it will be a hybrid of quantum computing and high performance computing wherever it is needed to speed up calculations. I'm very glad to have such prestigious speakers about this and participants like Professor Wolf from the TU Darmstadt, who is an expert in high performance computing and is also renowned on quantum computing. Yeah, that we have Jan Rosum from EY. EY is very engaged in these topics, and it was a great support to move this forward, great insight. And we have Stefan Kister from IBM. As we all know, IBM is running a quantum computer. Stefan will show us a real application on quantum computer, so that we hopefully get a touch and feel on this. And we have use cases from R&V Versicherung, Mohamed Azad Soleimani, and from our startup US Quantum, Niklas Hegemann, showing us reporting on a joint project they did on quantum computing. Besides these participants and speakers, I'm also very glad that we have the support from the Hessian government in form of the Digitalministerium and the House of Digital Transformation. And we're very happy to receive a welcome speech from the Minister of Digitization, Professor Christina Sinemus, and having Dr. Tina Kluge from the Digitalministerium and Hauke Schlüter from the House of Digital Finance as participants and supporters of these events. This is needed. We need the support for this from the government, and TechQuartier is also a platform to include the entire community, academia, startups, firms, banks, and also the political side. Francesco, that's from my side. Moving forward, I hand over to you. Let's start.
And thank you very much for your welcome note, Peter. Same words, I would say, indeed, there is a great potential behind this, potential behind quantum computing, but nothing can happen if there is the support of the ecosystem. There is not the support of the ecosystem, and especially, as you mentioned, also from public institutions. And as you mentioned already, we have now the possibility to watch a video that has been registered especially for this event by Professor Dr. Christina Sinemus, who is the Hessian Minister for Digital Strategy and Development. And without further ado, I would suggest to give her the stage for her speech. So we can go on with the video, and then we'll come back.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, 5 to 10 years from now, I envision the state of Hesse to be a distinguished player in the quantum computing and artificial intelligence, AI. This goal is indeed an ambitious one. Yet I am determined to embark on this journey. Since the beginning of this year, the state of Hesse supports the Center for Applied Quantum Computing, and we invest in Darmstadt 3.1 million euro. This clearly puts Hesse on the map of the Fraunhofer Society and creates a crucial approach to quantum computing in Europe. The state of Hesse is already a major advocate for quantum computing and AI on the national level, in the framework of working groups between the states and the federal government. Hesse contributes to a clear vision of Germany's digital future. The experience we have gathered throughout the last years helped substantially to further the development of quantum computing. An outstanding example in basic research is Professor Gerhard Birkel from the TU Darmstadt, who currently won 3.3 million euros from the Federal Research Ministry to do research on quantum bits. His research greatly enriched the academic landscape in Germany and Europe at large. For Hesse, the field of quantum computing and artificial intelligence in finance is also a major focus. The city of Frankfurt and its banking industry are drivers behind this issue. Quantum computing and AI will define all trade, financial transactions, and business. We view this issue as an important guarantor for Hesse's economic development and prosperity. We are an innovative state. That is why we focus on AI in the financial sector in our AI agenda. As one of the world's leading financial centers, Hesse aspires to be a pioneer in the use of AI in finance. This change must become a way of life to serve the people. Quantum computing and AI have arrived in our world. If we want to be ahead of the game, we have to embrace our new reality today. That is the future.
Not only the theoretical background that you explained perfectly, Professor Wolf, but also to talk a little bit more about potential use case. How could this look like? How this might be eventually deployed in the financial services sector? And with this, I would like to give the words to Jan Rosem, who is a partner at EY responsible for the topic of disruptive technologies within EY Financial Services, who will talk a little bit more about potential use case for this sector. So Jan, the stage is yours. We all look to your speech.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Francesco. And it's a pleasure to be here at this conference again, together with our friends from IBM and TechQuartier. So as Francesco was saying, the idea is to take you a little bit to the financial sector, the financial service industry, and also to show you a little bit what we see in the market and how financial service clients are approaching the topic of quantum computing and what our view is also on the developments. So when we look at the high-performance computing and parallel computing in general, as Professor Wolf was already evaluating a lot on. So then I see two things which shows us that we potentially reach a certain limitation. So, I mean, when I talk to people about high performance computing, and I did my PhD in numerical analysis, so I have a similar research background than Professor Wolf, then people believe that, okay, if we just increase the number of processors, then we should be much faster. And living in the world of, let's say, unconstrained resources, then we could just build a bigger computer just to make things faster. But the issue is that when you solve problems on a parallel computer, then depending on the algorithm, you see that at a certain amount of processors, you reach convergence from a speed up perspective. So meaning that if you add more processors, you will not get a faster result of this. And this is shown a little bit on the left-hand side, depending on the parallelism or the properties of the algorithm you use. And the reason is that you can imagine that if you have so many processors which they need to communicate with each other. So if one processor has basically calculated a certain part of your problem, then he needs to communicate these results to another processor, etc., etc. So there's a lot of communication going on between all these processors, meaning that if you add more processors, the speed up you get is eaten up by the time for the communication needed. So therefore, even if we add more processors, some of the problems we cannot still not solve, or we cannot get a speed up, which we would believe in if you add more processors. So that's one part. And the second graph on the right-hand side is the performance development of the top 500 list. So the top 500 list is something you can Google. It's basically it's a list of the biggest supercomputers in the world. So these are the top 500. And if you look at if you look at the slope and the performance development over the last 30 years, then you can see starting from 2010, something like this, you see that the curve is kind of slowing down. So it means that even if we have supercomputers which bigger than before, but still you see there's in the overall performance, you see kind of, I wouldn't say convergence, but it seems to slow down. So therefore, parallel computing and also building bigger computers does not mean that we can solve all the problems. So in my research, I did research in material science and also in weather prediction and tsunami predictions. Even if we had a bigger supercomputer, it would still not be possible to solve. The second or third aspect is what Professor Wolf described as the Moore's law, which is basically if you go back to a single CPU, a single processor, then we would expect that over time we see an increased performance of these single processors. And this also has come to kind of a state where things are not developing as quick as anymore, as we have seen over the last 20 years. So that means also on a single computer, we're not getting faster. If we add more processors together, it seems that we're not getting faster for certain issues. And that means it seems that we're kind of coming to, with a classical computer, coming certainly to a slowdown in performance. But the problems we're trying to solve, of course, getting bigger and bigger. We talked about weather forecast. I mean, our assumption would be, okay, why is the weather forecast still not so accurate? The reason is that it's just not feasible to calculate in every hour the whole weather situation for Europe. So therefore, the question is, okay, what are our clients currently doing to address these limitations? And the first thing is, of course, what we see specifically in financial services, there's a lot of efforts going around with reducing the problem. So basically in numerical analysis, what you do is, okay, if you can't solve it in 3 dimensions, so you try to lower the dimension to a 2-dimensional problem. So, and then trying to abstract from a 2-dimensional issue to a 3-dimensional problem. So we see a lot of the times that banks or financial service institutions use approximation, lowering dimensions, and generally the degree of freedom just to make it possible even to calculate the problems or to make it faster to calculate problems. So the second point is that, of course, we try to use advanced algorithm, and that's, I think, the whole research area Professor Wolf is involved in, is trying to, can we find algorithms which scale much better on a parallel computer than the algorithms we use today? But still there are limitations, and I think it's an ongoing community and a progress, but some problems we just can't make faster, and some problems we can't even calculate. So the third one is specifically on the financial service side, they reduce the frequency of calculation, meaning that they can't, not all of the risk banks currently need to monitor, they can do in a real-time fashion. So they do it once a day, they do it once a month, sometimes even once a quarter or once a year. Because the effort needed to calculate this is so immense that it's just not feasible to do it on a regular basis, which of course you can argue is a certain risk in it, because you cannot monitor things overnight or real time. And specifically on a day like today, where where the Fed is coming out with a new announcement around the interest rate environment US, of course, then you would like to have like a real time calculation to see what's going on in the market, to really quickly react to certain behaviors, because we will see behaviors in the equity market, the interest rate market, and banks need to react very quickly. So another thing is what Professor Wolf already explained, is you can use advanced hardware. So GPUs is one topic. We have certain techniques around edge computing. So of course you can try to use more advanced hardware, but then the most prominent idea for clients is of course to use into cloud computing. So meaning that if you don't have the hardware on site, you move your computations into a cloud environment where you have access to more and more processors and can speed up your computations in a more scalable infrastructure. But still doing all this comes with, of course, certain restrictions, and of course, still it's not possible to solve some of the problems. Why? Of course, quantum computing is potentially a solution to this, and that's why we are here, isn't it? Quantum computing gives us is, of course, that we achieve exponential speed up. So we have heard already from Professor Wolf. So today you have linear speed up, but here the hope is really, and that's the superiority beyond classical computers, is to have an exponential speed up of algorithm. So and this is of course a promise which needs to be proven and which will be proven over the next years, which of course will help us to solve some of the problems we currently can't really solve. And I mean, here just some examples of financial crisis predictions, specifically in the current very volatile markets, to understand on a macroeconomic and microeconomic level how the financial system behaves if certain things happening. If there's a shock like an interest rate increase, if the equity market goes down, what does it mean for the commodity market? What does it mean for other markets? So I mean, these kind of predictions currently are mainly done on fundamental analysis, but not on a simulation basis where someone can simulate all these things in a real-time fashion. So that's just not possible, and that's of course something where a supercomputer or a quantum computer can help. Then of course arbitrage calculation. I will talk about this a little bit later. So, and then we have the cryptography side, which I will also be touching a little bit on, because this is of course a threat to the industry, which because Shor showed that we can do a prime factorization actually can happen on a quantum computer, which can currently not happen on a classical computer, which of course threats the cryptographic algorithms we are currently using in our daily life, not just for financial service, but of course financial service are critical infrastructure providers. So therefore, we see that the financial service industry is currently investigating and looking into quantum computing and how to use them. And I think when we look at the use cases which are currently live, then most of so you can cluster it in two areas. So one is really on the, we call front office side, so really on the investment banking side, where specifically there was investment banks trying to understand if they can use quantum computing to make better predictions about the market, can make better decisions on how to structure their portfolio so that the portfolio behaves in a certain way. So the front office side is really something where a lot of people not just use AI, we heard about AI, but also trying to understand quantum computing for portfolio selection purposes, for prediction purposes, and really to gain benefits superior to their counterparties. Because financial market is always two counterparties trading with each other. And if the one counterparty has more information about the market or things which could happen, then of course he has benefits and advantages in the negotiation and discussion around pricing. So, and front office is also very interesting because it's not so much regulated than the risk management or the finance side. And I think this is also where we need also to regulators to get engaged, because if you look at today's financial service system, then everything which is around risk management, finance, specifically around where data needs to be reported to the authorities, to the regulators, there are a lot of regulations around this. And if you look at the regulation, then they actually give exact examples how the model should look like, which you're using. And as we heard from Professor Wolf, I mean, today's model cannot be transitioned one-on-one into a quantum world. So therefore, a lot needs to be happening on the risk side and on the finance side for the regulators to adapt quantum computing and to understand, okay, how does it change the risk models, how they look like today. So therefore, the banks try to mainly use areas where they are a bit more unregulated, and that's, of course, the front office side, where there's more freedom to use tailored models. So where do we believe we are? I mean, we believe that I mean, quantum computers and the idea are around for a long time. You can see it on this chart. But I think we're really here on the edge of acceleration, and that, of course, there are a lot of indicators in the market why we believe this is the way. And it's on the one hand side, we see the hardware advancing. I think Stefan will talk about IBM's hardware solution a little bit later on. So the hardware is advancing. There are more and more ideas how a supercomputer could look like, or a quantum computer could look like from a hardware perspective. We see a lot of funding going in this from private equity, but also from government side. I mean, we see the first quantum computer to be built in Germany, a lot of research going on. So therefore, I think we are currently leaving this phase of, let's say, kind of research, which is still ongoing, of course, but we're coming to a kind of commercialization. Really, we are at the point where it makes sense from our perspective to really look into the technology to understand what it means for your business. And if we look at the financial services side, then there is, of course, short-term, mid-term, long-term, and we can discuss for a long time what does it mean in the context of quantum computing, what is short-term, what is mid and long-term. But I think the use cases we see at the moment, and also use cases we are working in as EY, is a lot around optimization topics. So specifically around portfolio optimization. So the question is, okay, can I structure my portfolio in an optimal way that I can fulfill certain criteria and reach certain targets with my portfolio substitution, portfolio optimization, but also a topic when it comes to covered bonds and the constitution of covered bond portfolios, etc. So a lot of optimization at the moment seems to be an area where where you can see good results already on quantum computer. Not saying that you can exceed a classical computer, but it seems that this is the first step where financial service firms feel comfortable to investigate. And then, of course, another area is really around the quantum safe cryptography. I will talk about this a little bit more, but also the quantum random number generation, which is also a topic which is interesting, specifically if you look at financial service valuation models. So from a mathematical perspective, these are random partial differential equations which you're trying to solve. So it means you need random number generators as an input for your models. And as we know today, I mean, there is on a classical computer, there are limitations on the randomness of the random numbers. But on a quantum computer, there's a belief that this can be, the random numbers you generate can really be random. So this is something we see on the short term, and then also some first use cases and ideas around risk management, and not to replace the current risk management processes and models, but maybe to think about, is there anything we can do more than we do today? So midterm, it's all about machine learning. I think AI, we talked about data analytics, machine learning. So there will be a big area because the data increases, so we need more power to pre-calculate these models and to do analysis around machine learning and data analytics. So this is a midterm area, and then in the long term, we see maybe the more complex stuff around complex derivative pricing. Some derivative products are easy to calculate and have an analytical solution. So those are also areas where you could start testing quantum computing. But if you make it more complex, then we will need more time for the models and also the algorithms to develop. So this is a little bit our prediction. But one aspect, of course, is very dominant at the moment in our discussion. It's really what we call quantum resilience. So, and as I said, I mean, Shor found an algorithm where it's possible on a quantum computer to do prime factorization, which is currently not possible on a classical computer, or it would take so many years that it's just not practical. So therefore, if we can do this on a quantum computer, then a lot of algorithms for cryptography we use today are not secure anymore. And that, of course, is a big problem, because not just banks or financial service institutions, but of course, everyone in the industry uses cryptography everywhere. We use it when we exchange emails, when we browse on websites. So all of these algorithms need to be redone. I mean, just to imagine the scale, every of these algorithms, as long as they're not safe, and certain cryptographic algorithms are safe, but most of them we use in a day-to-day basis are not safe. So therefore, all of these protocols, hardware, software, need to be enhanced to make sure that it cannot be hacked by a quantum computer later on. And even if the quantum computer today doesn't exist yet, still you can collect cryptography data which you have, you can collect data which you then can later on, basically, when you have the quantum computer in place, you can then hack and can really get to the point or to the original data. And then still the information here is sensitive. So therefore, this is really in the focus area at the moment around financial services industry and quantum computing. Also, when we talk to the regulators, this is something they're really concerned of, that the data which is currently produced with these by using the cryptography is then hacked later on. And of course, financial services industry in general is a critical infrastructure. And imagine every payment we do every day uses these type of algorithm. So this may be, from my perspective, a little bit of an overview where we see the financial service firms, how they think about quantum computing and what the use cases are they are currently investigating. And having said that, I hand back to you, Francesco.
Well, thank you very much, Jan, for providing us with your perspective. It's actually a great addition to the talk that we heard before from Professor Wolf. We're coming from the theoretical aspects now into the use cases. And as you currently stated also and reiterated the message before, while Professor Wolf was saying the train is now accelerating, you stated again, we are now coming out slowly of research and coming into commercialization. But what does it mean, commercializing such kind of technology, and how does it link with the use case that you mentioned? I would like now to bring on the stage Stefan Kister, Dr. Stefan Kister from IBM, who is IBM Quantum Distinguished Ambassador and our expert, who will today talk about the perspective on the current hardware and a little bit more about the demo, how it works. Stefan, the stage is yours, and we'll all look to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Francesco. I hope the tone is okay, that you can hear me fine. Yeah, in my part, let's share my screen at the beginning. Right. Okay. So I do not have any charts. I have only a notebook, which I like to share with you. And can you see my notebook? Is that fine? Can you give me a
Yes, we can.
feedback? You can see it? Okay. Okay, fine. So let's start. So my part will be, let's say, very brief overview about the current hardware perspective. And the second part will be a demo on a quantum system, on a real quantum hardware, and a special kind of problem, which we call optimization problem. Right. So let's start with the current hardware perspective at the beginning. So as Professor Wolf already said, the future of computing will not be quantum only. Of course, we will see all kinds of technologies. We will see traditional technologies, so the kind of bits we already have. We will see new kind of AI systems, and of course, we will see quantum systems in the future. And will be, let's say, the task of this intelligent applications to bring all this kind of technologies together to solve, let's say, the problems, the challenging problems that we would like to solve in the future, right? And we will see, and we have already seen innovations in all these kind of fields. If you remember, last year, IBM mentioned, let's say, the first results on the 2 nanometer node chip in this classical area. In the area of AI systems, we have a lot of information about so-called analog AI systems. We also released an SDK on these analog AI systems recently. And these new AI systems will, let's say, be a new design paradigm, because we are moving away from Neumann architecture and come into this computational memory area where we have compute and memory in one device. And these devices are very energy efficient and very fast in comparison to, let's say, classical systems that are accelerated by GPUs, for example. And of course, we see the innovations in quantum, and maybe we have a deeper look into the quantum roadmap we recently updated in May this year. So when we see at the hardware layer, we are, let's say, really driving at a quite high speed to increase the number of qubits, to increase the quality of qubits, and increase also the speed of the systems. The speed means that we can run the circuits per second. We call them clubs. It is an index that we released last year to see how the way forward will go on with the quantum system we will develop. So today we have systems with 127 qubits available in our quantum network. And this year we will see systems with over 400 qubits. And next year we will see systems with chips that have over 1,000 qubits. And we also, let's say, updated this roadmap, and you can see that we move into another direction, not making the chips bigger. So we are trying the direction that we will see, let's say, combining different kind of chips on a board. So going from Condor to Flamingo to Kokobura. So driving, let's say, the number of qubits by connecting the different kind of quantum chips together on a so-called system board. But we also will see the development of HPC-like clustering systems, so that we have systems that are connected and that are not, let's say, connected over a board, but connected, let's say, on a system layer that we see here below, which are called Heron and Crossbill in the future. But we are not, let's say, looking only to the hardware development. We're also looking into the complete stack up to the layer where the applications can take the APIs to run Quantum as an accelerator for their calculation they would like to run to. So there is this kernel developer layer. So this is very system near a development layer. So we have there the Kisket Runtime, for example, which is available on our systems already. And we will, let's say, enhance this layer in the future with some more features. And also, let's say, the algorithm developer layer we are working on. Currently, we have, let's say, the so-called SDK, the software development kit, released as an open source project, which is called Kisket. And in Kisket, we currently are moving into this area of application modules. So we have application modules for machine learning, for natural science, for finance, and also for optimization. Right? And above, there will be, let's say, this development starting with 2023, which we call model developers. This is, let's say, the layer where, let's say, quite normal developers can have access to the quantum systems, although they do not have this, let's say, deep knowledge of the layers that are running below this layer. So they are, let's say, having the knowledge about, let's say, their business problem, about the application, and they know which kind of API they have to choose to accelerate their calculations. Right. And from this point, from this hardware roadmap point, I would like to go over to the demo, and I would like to, let's say, introduce a little bit to the demo. What is the demo about? We are using in this demo one of these Kisket modules for optimization. And this optimization module is, let's say, a package where different kind of APIs are available for, let's say, classical optimizers, for quantum parts, and we put that all, let's say, together under, let's say, a high-level modeling language, which is used as DocPlex. And currently, we can use this optimization module to solve quadratic programs. And we will see in the demo how we can, let's say, transform a problem from a quadratic mathematical point of view to a quantum computer that it is, let's say, able to be processed on a quantum device. Another point that we can see in the demo is the so-called Kisket Runtime. That is a little bit an accelerator on the kernel level of our stack, and this Kisket Runtime, say, pack all, let's say, the steps of this specific algorithm in the optimization algorithm we used in this demo so far. We have, let's say, a lot of circuits that are produced, and we put these circuits together, the algorithm together, put it into a container that's, let's say, close to the quantum computer, and we process these different kind of circuits, which are, let's say, named here in this picture as a loop. So these circuits are looped on a quantum computer, coming back to the classical device, then there are some classical optimizations, and then coming back to the quantum computer. And this is packed together to accelerate the complete algorithm. And in certain cases, for example, we use this for natural science simulations. We can see a speed up of more than 100 times in contrast to the, let's say, method we have, let's say, we have before, right? Good. So as Jan also already mentioned, the different kind of application areas, we normally categorize these applications in these mathematical categories or physical categories. So one thing is, of course, that is the reason where, let's say, actually quantum computing was built for, is the simulation of quantum systems, the simulation of nature. but we also can use it for, let's say, normal mathematical problems like we found in artificial intelligence or in optimization or Monte Carlo simulations right now. And you can, let's say, transform your use case into onto the different kind of algorithms that we can use here in these different kind of categories. Right. From the optimization problem point of view, I have to, let's say, set some expectation at the beginning. What is the focus of this demo, right? So we are concentrating on this demo around combinatorial optimization problems. Many of these combination optimization problems are NP-hard, so traveling salesman, max cut, and so on. Such kind of combinatorial optimization problems, of course, they can be transformed to real use cases. For example, like portfolio optimization can be transformed to a combinatorial optimization problem and can be then addressed similar to, let's say, what we can see here in the demo right now. From the quantum algorithm point of view, there are different kinds of algorithms that are possible in this field. And one category is the so-called variational quantum algorithm. And we pick one specific variational quantum algorithm, which is called variational quantum Eigensolver here. And we focus in this workshop on a very, very simple Kubo problem, just to show you today how the transformation from this mathematical problem is done, and how I can transform it to a quantum computer, and how I can, let's say, at the end, process it to the quantum computer at the end and get the results back from the quantum computing and also from the classical part that is, let's say, combined in this algorithm. Good. Also some general aspects and challenges. Of course, optimization problems, as I said, are very challenging for classical systems. Mostly I'm dealing with multivariate cost function, which have to be optimized. And this is, let's say, not a very easy task for classical calculations, for classical computers. In the quantum world, we are moving, let's say, in the Hilbert space, and we normally, let's say, in the Hilbert space, we are searching when we are looking, let's say, from the natural science perspective. We are looking for the ground state energy of the Hamiltonian, which is encoded into this Hamiltonian. And for that, we normally need the wave function, but we do not know this wave function at the beginning and or at all. And one possible solution is the so-called variational method. So we start with a wave function, which is parameterized, and we try to optimize this parameter, which hopefully bring us then close to the wave functions with, let's say, bring us at the end near to the ground state energy. Right? So coming, let's say, a little bit closer to this quantum world. So as I said, in this problem area, we are talking about Hamiltonians, and then the Hamiltonian, typically the total energy is encoded. And as I said, the variational principle can be used to solve this, this optimization problem. With that, we are using a parameterized wave function. So we start with a tri-wave function at the beginning, and by optimizing the parameters, we are hopefully get closer to the ground state energy, which we would like to solve at the end. On a quantum computer, this parameterized wave functions can be easily represented by a uniform transformation, which is also parameterized, applied to the, let's say, initial state, which is the ket 0 in this equation. And by optimizing these theta values or these parameters on a classical optimizer, we can then, let's say, bring all together in one loop to have, let's say, the complete optimization equation solvable on a quantum computer in combination with a classical optimization. So how is the problem come to a quantum computer? So we are talking about so-called quadratic unconstrained binary optimization problem, which is one, let's say, part of the combinatorial optimization problems. And we do a variable transformation. So we are moving from 0, 1, from the binary to -1, 1 variables. And at the end, we are getting a Hamiltonian, which is, let's say, weighted tensor product of the Pauli operators. So this is a transformation from the classical mathematical problem to the Hamiltonian. With the Hamiltonian, we need to solve this energy equation by using the variational method at the end. For that, we need a so-called parameterized circuit, and the circuit is called Ansatz. And we need also, let's say, classical optimizer, which we can choose from the APIs in the Kisket capabilities. Bringing that all together in a little bit, an overview picture. So how is this loop working at the end? So we have this optimization problem, which is described by a cost function, and we are moving it to a Hamiltonian. And this Hamiltonian then, let's say, is used to solve this optimization equation on a quantum computer in combination with the classical optimization. We start with our ansatz, so the parameterized uniform transformation, and we start with initial parameters, and we are measuring the eigenvalues or the eigenstates of this circuit, and these eigenvalues are then brought into the classical optimization calculation, and we are moving to new theta values, which are then brought back to the quantum computer. And again, we are measuring the eigenvalues with these kind of new theta values. And therefore, we have this this loop for optimization, and we are looking, let's say, for convergence of this problem. And we hope that we, when we converged at the end, we found the right, let's say, solution of the problem. Good. So as I said, we use a very simple combinatorial optimization problem or Kubo problem. This is a very simple max-cut problem. So in this notebook, there is a lot of math before, but we should not, let's say, go through it in detail because of the time window. So let's have a look at this max-cut problem, which is very, very simple. So it is generated with Kisket and with this optimization module. So there are only 3 points in this graph, and we have different kind of weights between the different points in this graph. And it is very, very simple, as I said. When we calculate, let's say, the weight matrix, we can calculate the problem, of course, by using the brute force approach. That means, going back here, sorry, we have 3 points here. So the combination, which all, let's say, have all possible cuts addressed, is 2 above 3. So we have 8 solutions, and in this, let's say, kind of problem, we can, of course, let's say, calculate each problems by brute force at the end. When you see it here in the calculation, we see that there are, let's say, 2 and special results that are, let's say, the optimum value, which is 5.0, the optimum value, the optimum cuts for this problem. So this is a result, the exact result from the brute force analysis, right? So how is this problem then brought to a quantum computer? At the first, we have to formulate from this graph problem or graphical problem, this max-cut problem, we have to formulate quadratic program so that we can get, let's say, the objective function of it. And this is done also, let's say, easily in Kisket, because Kisket has some kind of APIs. So the max-cut, which you can see here, is defined by the graph we have shown above. And we can easily take this MaxCut and use this library or this API to quadratic program, right? And with that, we can see that the objective function is, let's say, created. And we see also the bounds, the binary bounds of the variables. And we see, let's say, the binary variables that are used here because we having only 3 in this case at the end. So it's very simple. We do not have any subjects we have to consider as well. So we can, let's say, do a simple transformation to, let's say, to the Hamiltonian. First of all, here it's just, let's say, a calculation to confirm the right path right now. So we have here also an exact classical calculation. We use a Python operator here, or Python class. And we see also that one of the optimal values of this MaxCut problem has a value of 5, and the optimum value is 110, which is one also of the brute force results that we received here in the brute force calculation. Right, and going now over to the variable transformation, we also can use the Kisket library, which is called ToIsing, and ToIsing is making this variable transformation so that we get, let's say, from the quadratic program, which is formulated above, this is QP, which is then transformed to an Ising Hamiltonian at the end. And the library brings out the Hamiltonian, and as I said before, we have here these tensor products of the Pauli matrices, and there are some weight factors and some offsets that has to be considered regarding to the problem we put into this quadratic program. Right, so checking that the Hamiltonian we give also the right answer to the problem, we also again do a calculation, a classical calculation, but now we use this Ising Hamiltonian, and at the end we also get, let's say, the right solution objective of 5, and the right solution, one of the two, is 110 at the end. So now we are, let's say, running it on a quantum computer. So how can you transform it to the quantum computer? This is the picture we saw at the beginning, and we exactly use this path now to bring, let's say, this Hamiltonian on the quantum computer, and we use, let's say, this kind of classical calculation to do, let's say, at the end, the parameterization optimization at the end. Okay, so we need some random parameters at the beginning. So for starting with, let's say, parameterized wave function at the beginning, we need a classical optimizer. We choose this one. This is one optimizer from, let's say, from the Kisket optimization module. We said, okay, we will need 150 iterations, and we need the so-called ansatz. So this is the parameterized wave functions at the end. So we use a very simple one. So the simple one is we only use 3 qubits because our, let's say, MaxCut problem has only 3 points we have to represent by 1 qubit. And we need this, let's say, some rotations, rotations around the y-axis, and we use some entanglement to, let's say, 2 qubit gates, which are represented here in the middle, right? And we can use now this optimizer, and we can use this ansatz to get, let's say, the loop started and to do the calculation on the quantum computer. We are defining here at the beginning, so we use this simulator at the beginning. So simulator is running on my laptop. Because I have installed this Kisket package on my laptop, it is, as I said, free, it's open source. So I can use this at the beginning to see if the calculation is running in the right direction. And we are defining the so-called variational quantum Eigensolver. algorithm. For that, we use also, let's say, a Kisket library, and this VQE, you can see here, is defined with the ansatz, with the optimizer. We define some parameters we want to call back when we have this loop, and we have this quantum instance with, let's say, the state vector simulator as our backend, and all the random parameters we need at the beginning. Okay. So we then run it on a quantum computer, so on the simulator. So this is the execution command. So we are using this Ising Hamiltonian, and we are trying, let's say, to get the eigenvalues of this Ising Hamiltonian at the beginning, right? Good. And you see that the solution is also the same, or the same, let's say, objective function, the same solution of the Max-Cut problem is the same solution objective, right? So we access, let's say, the right results for the simple problem. Good. How does it work? So how does it, let's say, converge? We can see, we remember we have 150 iterations that we used, and we can see that between 80 and 100 iterations, our result is nearly stable, and let's say the right result, so the solution objective of 5.0 at the beginning. So this is a simulation on my laptop, which was a solid state vector simulator. But now we are going to the real quantum devices. Although we are using a simulator again, that stands in, let's say, for other real quantum devices that are freely available. We can see that from my local perspective, I get all the quantum computers when I have an account to the IBM Quantum Experience. Maybe I can change shortly to the Quantum Experience website. So if you are going to Quantum Computing IBM.com, you can register to that site. Everyone can register to this. It's totally free. And with that, you can, let's say, have access to the Quantum Composer and also to the Quantum Lab, which is somehow Qiskit in a browser. And we have also access to quantum systems. When we have a look to the quantum systems that are available, we can see that quantum systems are available between 127 qubits up to 1 qubit. But they are not all free. All the, let's say, quantum systems that are not having such lock at the beginning, these are the free ones, which are normally the ones with 5 qubits or lower, right? And we also have, let's say, access to simulators. We have different kind of simulators. And the one we will use in this demo is the IBM Q Quasant simulator. So this is a simulator that goes, let's say, beyond the state vector simulation. So it's simulating qubits, and it's including some kind of noise that is, let's say, implemented normally with qubits that we are using in our real devices. Okay, so going back to the demo, we can see that the backend device is now this IBM Quasant simulator. And we, again, just choose our optimizer, and we use, again, our ansatz, which is, let's say, used in this kind of library or this kind of class. This VQE client class is exactly that thing that is called IBM runtime program. And this runtime program is a special program for VQE on the IBM Quantum Experience, right? And with that, we have this acceleration. So having all the different kind of circuits that are normally necessary in this optimization problems. So we define the ansatz, the optimizer, and we said, okay, for each experiment, we have a different number of shots we can give with this kind of library. And we use now this runtime VQE to calculate it again against this Ising operator Hamiltonian right now. So here is the runtime VQE, and we are using the eigenvalues and the eigenvalue results of this Ising Hamiltonian. And then we are giving these back to the classical optimization to the optimizer that has been defined over here. So we have here maximum iteration of 125. And with that, we can also, let's say, drive through all this complete loop. And we can see that also on this nearly real quantum device, although it is a simulator, we can achieve the right result. So the solution objective is 5.0. But we do not, let's say, achieve this result for the result of 110. We have, let's say, the 100. So one point maybe, if you recognized that in Kisket, let's say the number of qubits is the other way around. So the solution or the solutions was 110 and 001 at the beginning of the, let's say, classical calculation or of the normal Python calculation, if you have that, right? So we come back here with also a correct solution, but the other solution that is possible for the simple problem. And at the end, we also can have a look to the convergence of this calculation. And we also see that we are around 60 to 80 iterations. We are nearly achieving this convergence. So with that, we are not, let's say, moving very far away from the correct result at the end. Okay.
Dr. Kister, we're almost out of time, so maybe a few minutes.
Yes,
but
and I'm almost ready.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope it was, let's say, interesting for you. So giving back to you, stop my sharing, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan. It was very much appreciated. I have to say that it was indeed a very insightful presentation with a lot of very different topics that you have covered, and you have shown actually how it works, right? For the people that are looking into this, I think it was maybe one of the first possibilities to grasp with their eyes exactly how this could look like if they would like to implement this using the technology that you are providing. Thank you very much for that. And we are moving from theory to practice. And while we are on this trip, of course, it's also interesting to showcase how this could look like in reality. If one would like to start a project into quantum computing, how could be done? Of course, not only from the technological point of view, but actually also from the practical aspects. How could look like to work on this? And we have two guests that are actually here with us today that will provide us with further information on how this could have been taken into reality. And the two guests that we have with us today are Mohammed Assadomalini, risk manager from RNV Versicherung, and Niklas Eggermann, co-founder and managing director of YOS Quantum. Having said that, Niklas and Mohammed, the stage is yours, and
Sure.
we'll all look forward to your presentation.
Just before we begin, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Niklas?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Okay,
And,
perfect.
the
Do you
audience
see
can-
the first
Now,
slide?
yes.
Okay, perfect. Then everything is set to go. So welcome from my side as well. My name is Niklas, and I am the managing director of Just Quantum. We are a startup company based in Frankfurt. We're sitting here in Tech Quartier, and we are building software and quantum algorithms for finance, insurance, and energy. And I have the pleasure today to be with Mohammed Assadomalini from RNV Versicherung. Please, Mohammed, you go ahead first.
Thanks a lot. That's my pleasure to be here today too, and to collaborate with Niklas in a collaboration with Just Quantum and Fraunhofer in a practical problem. We can exactly. My name is Mohammed. I'm working with insurance in Wiesbaden. We can move to the first slide if you like, Niklas. As you hear,
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt again. So I'm sharing the slides currently.
Exactly.
So Mohammed will tell me, and we'll switch in between. So we'll make it a little bit dynamic. So sorry, Mohammed.
Just a slide before, fine. As you hear today, within Jan.
I'm sorry. That's the correct slide.
There are a couple of problems in a couple of fields which are really suitable to apply quantum algorithm. One of them is the optimization. Just in the slides before with Stefan, we saw the very simple optimization, which is called QUBO, the quadratic unconstrained binary problem, which is very similar. You can find different application of this problem in different kind of science. One of them is in finance, is known as Markowitz problem or mean variance problem. The problem is, as you can see in the first column of the slide, the Z is a function and depends on the volatility of your assets or asset classes and of the return. And you define, as just mentioned before in the presentation of Stefan, a cost function. And the goal is to minimize the cost function depending on the weight of your assets. For example, if you have equity and bonds, and you want to buy, and you have 100 euro, you want to invest 100 euro in different way in two kind of assets, 50-50, 40-60, or so on. So the problem is written down in the first column, and you have to find the possible or the suitable weights called W's, Wi and Wy. You get a linear problem, and you have to find the optimized line, which you give the optimization of the weights for your portfolio. It means with the most returns and less risks. So within and for insurance, that is a general problem with all investment houses, like it's banks or funds, etc. You have to invest a couple of money or a certain amount of money in different kind of assets. We add in other conditions to the basic problems, namely SCR. SCR is this solvency capital requirement. I will show you why is it important and why we are using that. And within for insurance, we are going to more conditions which we admit to the function which we have to optimize. The first step is to add a CR, and then we are going to a couple of accounting figures like IFS, HGB, which is German kind of accounting rules, and transitions cost. And you can see just in the figures or in the slides down that from the one linear problem, we are getting more complicated optimization problem, which are in the first step, you can get 3 dimension, and the dimension is getting much more. So it means, okay, from a linear problem, we are going to a multi-variate optimization problem. So can we go to the next slide?
Yes, 1 second.
Thanks a lot. So in practice, looks like looks like this slide that you have in the left side, your assets or your asset classes. You get different weights, and different mu is the return of your asset and sigma is the volatility. In the pic of the right-hand side, you can see a heat map. The color shown in this heat map shows you the solvability of your portfolio or your weights. It means, okay, the first problem is to show your suitable asset weight, your suitable solution, because we are going from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. And this problem will accompany us according to whole process, because we are going to admit more and more conditions in the main function which we want to optimize. So I go to the next slide. I mentioned just before, we need solvency capital requirement. Why? Because we, not just us, all investment houses like banks and funds or should be responsible. It means we are, in the case that we are going bankrupt, the taxpayer should, as we saw in 2007, 2008, the taxpayer should pay for that. That means we have to consider the solvability of the company too. And the solvability of solvency capital requirement ratio gives you the solvability of your company in 12 months is for 99 or 5%. So we have to consider this measure because it's a regulatory rule and it's necessarily for our responsibility that we want to avoid that we are going bankrupt. So the challenges from the technical mathematical point of view is you have to admit more variables into your original function, to your kubo. That means, okay, you lose precision, and from the other side, your result would not be so precision as you want, and you lose performance too. That would be getting more complicated. So beneath solvency capital requirement is a new measure, and we see if we take it into your original function, that would be complicated, much more complicated to get stable results and precision results. For example, we need actually with a classical solution something like 10 hours for the whole portfolio. That is the reason, because we are moving to use quantum algorithm. We hope that we get more precision, because that is not so easy as always mentioned, in my opinion. So better performance, and we would be able to calculate for the whole portfolio in the real time. But not to forget is, I want to emphasize that one way and the way to generate classical benchmarks, we deep our knowledge about the algorithm, and we can probably improve the quantum algorithm from the software side, because we are in the gate level. We are not in the level that we are using high-level programming language. And from the other side, it's always good to be fit for new tools and techniques while we are using quantum algorithm. So, Niklas, I guess you have enough motivation to show what we did.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed, for the explanation why R&V is interested in actually using quantum computers in the future and doing this awesome research project with us and Fraunhofer. So I will now show you like the first step of using a quantum computer to solve the optimization part of the problem, because the problem is actually, like Mohammed explained, the optimization part, but also the solvency calculation. So in the first step, we're doing only the mean variance part without the solvency ratio. And I'm trying to explain this in a way that it's understandable what we are doing here. So in the first step, we want to calculate like the optimal allocation of assets in terms of return or expected return. Some people might say, okay, well, is it really necessary or feasible expected returns? But we leave it like this because investors have a certain view on markets. We will include risk, so covariance and volatility, and a certain budget we have to allocate the assets. And we actually start with a certain allocated asset portfolio. And we want to calculate the next like rebalanced step. So therefore, to use the quantum algorithm, we need to translate the classical optimization into a quantum program to use the actual quantum computer. Stefan Kister from IBM was quite detailed in explaining how this is done. And in the first step, we are actually also using the mathematical formulation, which is called Quadratic Unconstrained Binary Optimization, short QUBO. And this is equivalent to a physics model, the Ising model. Maybe it rings a bell with from physicists in the auditorium. So like on the rest on the left side, you see a short cut of the a snapshot of the asset classes we're actually looking into in the first step. And on the left bottom side, there is a small example, which is called Knapsack Problem, a well-known mathematical problem, which is in general NP hard, so very complex combinatorial problem. And the idea is to pack a knapsack, so a backpack with items that have a certain value and a certain weight, but you are limited in carrying things, so you need to choose the best items that have the most value. And illustrated here only 4 items, but if there are a few hundred items, this is actually a very intense computational problem. And even what happens if the weights or the cost, the value is not a static number, but a random variable with a certain distribution. So it can get really complicated. And this is like the analogon to the asset allocation we are doing. And in the first step, we are translating this combinatorial optimization problem, including the budget constraints as a QUBO, which means, so you can think about translating it to a energy landscape. So it's pictured on the right bottom side, like a rough landscape, and the state or the optimal solution we are looking to is actually the lowest energy state in this landscape. So that's the first part. And then we actually use 2 different kinds of variational quantum algorithms. So the first one, the variational quantum Eigensolver, Stefan already showed in the demo to solve the graph problem MaxCut. So I will not explain it again, but the basic idea here is to use a quantum computer to prepare the quantum state and measure the state and measure the expectation value. And because you have a certain parameters in your circuit, you can tune the parameters with the classical computer on the right side, adjust the values a little bit, and then prepare your state again and measure and kind of iterate through this landscape to the best and optimal solution. So these kind of algorithms are called hybrid algorithms because they use a quantum computer and a high performance classical computer. And what we achieved in the first step is actually really cool because we used the first German quantum computer in Ehningen in Stuttgart from IBM, which is operated by Fraunhofer. It has in total 27 qubits and is a nice machine for R&D work and to get to know how to use the machines more efficiently. So our goal was actually to test the performance with a very, very small first toy model consisting of 6 assets and a certain initial distribution of the portfolio. So W, mu are the expected returns, and sigma are is the volatility. So the goal was to build this complete workflow from defining the problem statement, building the quantum circuit. So actually we used the VQE and the quantum approximate optimization algorithm, QAOA short, which are quite similar, both hybrid quantum algorithms. So we built the circuits and the full workflow in mapping the algorithm to the circuit. To the hardware topology, because as the speakers before already mentioned, not only relevant for the performance of a quantum computer is the number of qubits, but also the quality of the qubits, but also the topology. So which qubit can talk to which one. So what you see here in B is the actual topology of the IBM Q in Ehningen. So for example, qubit 0 and 1 are connected, but not 0 and 26. So we picked the best set of qubits, which suits the topology of the algorithms, and mapped it to the calibration, because the quality of each qubit, it depends on a on the calibration done of the machine. So the first insights are that we are able to find the optimal solution with both of the algorithms we tested for the small toy model. It is worth mentioning that this is still an early R&D device. So as I said, the qubits are not fully connected. So we needed to optimize the quantum algorithm itself to make it short and perfectly mapped to the best qubit sets. And another insight we might talk about is that we do not expect quantum advantages from optimization problems, optimization only problems. So the only part of the combinatorial optimization problems, like the traveling salesman, for example, will not expect that a quantum algorithm or currently known quantum algorithms will outcompete or bring advantages to these problems. But most of the optimization problems, the parameters or the objectives or parts of the objective are uncertain. So if uncertainty is introduced, like for example the solvency ratio, this is the holy grail of the next step. So in the next step, we're going to introduce the solvency ratio. Just looking on the watch. To gain insights to the current machines and use them in a more efficient way. And beside the project, there are actually a lot more application areas where quantum computers will bring advantages, and we are investigating. As I said in the beginning, we are building like a platform for end users in finance, insurance, and risk, and energy. One of the other topics we are investigating are high-dimensional Monte Carlo simulations, so sampling of high-dimensional distributions. So in this field, quantum algorithms, Monte Carlo simulations are used in risk management. Jan from E&Y actually touched a few topics where Monte Carlo simulations are used. Quantum computing might bring these, for example, risk calculations from days down to real time. And then as a bank, you can ask yourself, okay, what can I do with real time risk assessments? Another exciting topic actually is quantum machine learning. For example, with artificial market data, we might capture highly complex market data and prepare like the route to a new era of forward-looking risk management. And also fraud detection, where millions of transactions need to be scanned, being one step ahead criminals and not delayed, can save billions of losses and fines. And another example, real-time risk scoring to serve clients' needs when they actually need the loans and not when it's too late, is another nice example. And what I did not mention here for the again the loop to the Monte Carlo simulation is the business risk assessment and the sensitivity analysis, which brought down computation times or extrapolated computation times from years to minutes. So things are going to be happen which will not be possible with classical computers, and this is the vision we are following. And to wrap it up, actually, please check our GitHub page. We're sharing workshops, introductions, tutorials, and also develop our open source part of our software to be able to use also our algorithms we are building. Have a glance about our ideas of quantum probabilistic modeling, because probabilistic nature of capital and energy markets are a perfect match for the probabilistic nature of quantum. So thanks very much, and next to you, Francesco.
And thank you very much, Nicholas, also for this overview. Indeed, if there are any questions from the audience on YouTube, please do not hesitate to post them in the chat. We will try to capture them and to use them to set up the next discussion that is now open. And I would like to welcome all the guests that we had today. And thank you, all of you, first of all, for the interesting speeches that you have given. But going back to the speech that you, Mohammed and Nicholas just gave, and talking about the fact that the things will happen, that's the kind of phrase that I would like to capture as one of the last words that you mentioned. The first question that comes into my mind is, it is true that things will happen, but if we see at the speed of development of quantum computing over the last months and the last years, it seems that this it could be relatively closer than we expect. So why is right now the right time for banks or financial services institutions to start to engage with this technology? Nicholas?
We cannot hear you, Nicholas.
I muted. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, as an in my experience, banks and financial institutions, they are running crucial processes, and they are running it on crucial hardware, on crucial infrastructure. And if you want to replace crucial infrastructure, that's a transformative project of several years. And the software and the whole architecture needs to run for the next 10 to 20 years. So in the next 10 to 20 years, a lot of things can happen with quantum. So now is the time to investigate in what areas quantum can actually bring the benefits and build the architecture and the infrastructure in a way that quantum can be used.
So it's very interesting to state this once again. Now it's the time to start investigate things, to get into the field and eventually learn for things that might have an implication for the decades to come. And we heard also from this morning that even though we are suggesting, we're talking about this and we are stating that the need is right now, we heard the quantum advantage, the so-called quantum advantage, might still need a little bit of time. Even though looking at the numbers, Stefan, that you mentioned and the qubits that you expect to reach with your technology, this might be, as I mentioned before, sooner than later. But when could these actually take place?
Yeah, I think it is a very important question, but it's very difficult to answer right now. And as Niklas already mentioned it is, let's say, hard to achieve a quantum advantage. So we have to look at, let's say, different dimension about the quantum advantage. One is, of course, normally we are thinking of a performance increase by quantum. So when we think about quantum computer as an accelerator, it should be faster than a classical computer. And we are talking about quantum computing or quantum advantage when this, let's say, will happen in a real world use case. So not in an artificial use case, which can be constructed, but something that is, let's say, really of scientific or business relevance at the end. So, but that is not only the question of performance, I think it's also, let's say, can be a question of, let's say, being more accurate, for example, that it can also be a quantum advantage, or delivering more stable results at the end, like classical calculations at the end. There are three different paths that we are seeing there where quantum advantage can play a role. Currently, when you remember the IBM roadmap, we are still on these which we called physical qubits, or so these are the systems which are called the noisy intermediate scale quantum computers. But we are also, let's say, concentrating our research work to get quantum advantage also with these kind of systems. This is harder to achieve than we think of when we think of, let's say, a universal quantum computer with so-called logical qubits, which are error corrected in the future. But when we see the hardware development and also see the development in the algorithm area and all the complete layer that is above the hardware, there might be some use cases that can be, let's say, benefit from quantum computing already with this noisy intermediate quantum systems right now.
And bringing you also in the discussion, Professor Wolf, and connecting the answer that Stefan just gave with the 3 points that you mentioned in your presentation, like when we talk about quantum, we should not just think about scale or the qubits, but we should also think about the quality and speed. And considering the fact that scale is something that is slowly coming up, but still needs time, still needs investment, will the investments also into quality and speed actually bring us back to the points that Stefan just mentioned to achieve faster quantum advantage in the market?
Okay, yeah, thanks for asking this question, and I hope everyone can hear me now. I apologize for the sound problems during the presentation. So my question companies that work on quantum platforms actually have all these dimensions on their radar. So I think there's none that invest exclusively in scale. So in number of qubits, all have the other parameters, the coherence time, and also the error correction on their mind, and are working hard to achieve this. Not sure whether that answers your question.
It provides an answer. Now, whether this is the answer, we'll give it to the audience, that I encourage also to send us questions that we are gathering as well. But I would like also to bring another perspective into the discussion and ask the question to you, Jan. We are trying to let the audience understand, and especially participants in the financial services sector, that it's important to engage right now. But we are not touching the point, what could it mean if we don't see these parties engaging into this field, waiting for the solutions to be there? Could this be a new gap that we will notice in the market between the ones that actually gather this knowledge and are ready where the technology is there, and the ones that are lagging behind? And what kind of problems this could be, especially consider the security aspects that you mentioned in your presentation?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So I think those are a couple of questions in one question. So I mean, of course, we encourage companies to engage with the technology. Just a comment on the use case, which at least that's my view. Of course, we're trying to solve problems we currently have with a quantum computer, which would help us to understand the quantum computer better. But my belief is, with these new technologies, I think we haven't even discovered what we can solve with it. So I think a lot of use cases, we don't even know yet what they will be. So therefore, it's very early in the technology. And if you generally look at emerging technologies, we tend to try to solve existing problems. But it will be a long way, and there will be things coming up we haven't even thought about where quantum computer can help us. So therefore, I think it's important to engage now to learn. I mean, we have seen in Stefan's example, it's not straightforward. So, and you need also people who are knowledgeable about physics, mathematics, and that is, of course, is a challenge as well. So, I mean, to wait for very long is not an option. Because, as you were saying, I mean, either if you're not engaging, then someone else will do it. And specifically, when we talk about capital markets, of course, the one side who has the knowledge will probably be smarter than the other side. And that's always the thing, isn't it? If someone is buying, someone is selling. So therefore, if you buy smart, you are better off than the other side. So, and I think that there's a lot to lose, so that's why I think it's important to start early, also to educate. I mean, the talent market is super tight. I mean, even at the moment. So, and of course, it's good to see that the universities are engaged in others, but talent will be big thing. So yeah, so this is a little bit my view. So, but as you were saying, I think the community needs to come together because it's so unique and special new technology. So I think if we leave everyone on its own, then probably will not come very far. So I think that's the reason why the Tech Quartier initiative here is so good, to bring the institutions together to work together on understanding the capabilities of quantum computing.
And indeed, if we see the participants today, or at least the speakers that we have today, we have different parties from the field itself, from research and other companies that are pushing the technology itself. And I would like also to hear your perspective, Mohammed. How was it for you when you started this journey together with Yoast Quantum, exploring this technology? And what is your expectation now that the first phase of this trial is coming slowly to an end and the next steps are actually waiting for?
Thank you for the question. That was really interesting because we meet each other in a radar, as just here was mentioned, in a radar process from DZ Bank in Frankfurt, and that was the question: which cases would be suitable for the quantum algorithm? And I detected that time 2 cases, and one of them was this kind of optimization of Kubo. Okay, I was realistic, and I saw, okay, the problem is there, the solution is even there, but you have to bring the problem in a shape which is suitable for knowing solution, because you have a couple of problems which you can solve with quantum algorithm. You have different kind of problems on the quantum algorithm, the quantum computing side. One of them is hardware, and one of them is to develop even algorithms which are capable or applicable on the simulator or on the hardware directly. But the journey itself, because you mentioned the journey, is very interesting, because you learn not something about classical way of algorithm, even beyond that, because you want to develop the classical algorithm or thinking, or the manner how you think, to another way to implement it. And this challenge brings more knowledge for knowing implementation, which you have, classical implementation, which you have, and make you ready even to be fit, or to be getting fit, to apply in 5 years, in 10 years, quantum computer, in the case that the hardware is so far. Just compared to 70s or 80s, we are in the 70s probably, compared to classical computer, where you have to develop different frontiers, even software and hardware. That is the challenge for all companies, I guess, and you have to work with all the CEOs and manager to confirm or to convince them that is an important step in the future. And you can learn a lot about your knowing implementation, and even how can I change the shape.
And I believe these are great points, and I hope that with these events and with the opportunity that we are providing with the community, many of the people in the C-suite are starting to understand that it's right now the time to engage into this. It's right now the time to act. But you mentioned also one important point, I think, Mohammed, and I reconnect also with what you mentioned, Jan, which is learning. And I interpret this also going back to what you said, Jan, about the necessity of having the right skills in place or developing them, because this is a new set of new technology that requires a new set of skills in order to implement this in the right way, at least. But still, this is something that can be learned. And going back to your demo, Stefan, and maybe asking the question, because you're also proactive in providing knowledge to the interested parties. What might take to develop this knowledge into a company? So how could one do this?
Yeah, I think there are different ways, and skills are very important to get, let's say, what we say, into the position of being quantum ready. And the easiest or cheapest way, but the most time-consuming way, is when you do it yourself. So there's a lot of, let's say, free resources out there. There are a lot of free quantum devices. We provided IBM already there. There are Kisket. SDK is open sourced, and we have a lot of educational modules out there and classes out there. But I think as a company, when you want to, let's say, get speed to your quantum journey, you should collaborate with companies that are, let's say, experienced in the usage of quantum computing. And I think the example that Niklas and Mohammed explained or mentioned, it's a quite good example to see, okay, let's collaborate with a startup, let's collaborate with a research institute like Fraunhofer together to bring all the heads together to get, let's say, speed on your way to quantum, or to get quantum ready right now. And of course, there are offerings also by the system integrators like EY or others, and even IBM has some, let's say, offerings that, let's say, brings you as a client faster to your path to quantum computing readiness at the end.
And thank you very much also for this answer, Stefan, because it provides an additional input on how to start. So talking to the C-suite, make sure that they understand the need and the urgency to start this, as you mentioned, Mohammed, but also developing the right skill, but eventually even collaborate with the right parties to make the possibilities of success even higher. And now the question is, if I will be a CEO of a bank, let's put it this way, and or at least one within the department that is dedicated for deciding together with the CEO about this, how shall I evaluate the next steps now? I'm convinced that I need to do something. What could be the next steps, or how could I start the next actions, or what kind of actions I need to think about? Nicholas, maybe we'd love to hear your point on this.
Well, that's a discussion we're having quite often, and it always so boils down to not only train or to get trained and learn what is a qubit and what is a quantum gate and what I can do with a 5-qubit quantum computer. That's maybe interesting, but to strategically position a company towards like the next 5 to 10 years, you need to evaluate use cases and build prototypes, or being able to evaluate prototypes by building them. So that's actually our approach and our experience from the last years, that the theoretical convergence or complexity analysis is not enough. You really need to analyze a problem, have a long list of potential application areas, and then go from one to the next, build the prototype, the quantum circuit, evaluate, extrapolate. How many qubits do I need in the future to solve the real world problem? What quality of qubits do I need? What quantum algorithms do I even need to run this? What compiler? How to integrate in the architecture? So all the questions are coming after really having something to evaluate on. And that's the first prototype. So I would recommend starting with a small learning journey, identify potential use cases and evaluate them by building the prototype. And that's the really hard part. And when you identify 5 or 10 use cases, maybe only one is suitable. So there is always attached a risk that you might pick the wrong one in the first turn. But yeah, we need to be a little bit more, leaning towards the technology and not being afraid of doing something wrong. I mean,
I will even say to be more pragmatic and take the first step, be closer to the community, talk, get the learning, and eventually start, which is indeed a very good point. If you never start, you never learn, and eventually can start small and then increase over time. But Jan, you talked a lot about use cases before. You talked a lot about what kind of possibilities there are in the financial services sector. Now, Nicholas has already mentioned the institutions should start, identify some of the use cases that are relevant for them, and then start learning, start experimenting on them. So how could a project like this, or eventually a kind of activities like this into a bank could look like? So do I need to, I don't know, found a quantum computing set of experts and lock them for 5 years in order to understand whether it's good for me or not? So what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, if we step back a little bit, it's not different to any kind of other emerging technologies. I mean, we had the same discussions 5 years back talking about blockchain or other stuff. So I mean, usually my experience is it starts with the innovation guys. So I mean, nearly every financial service institution we're working with have understood they need some kind of innovation department to look into these emerging technologies. So most of the time it starts there, and I think that's also what I understood from DZ. So that they have an innovation team and they start looking into these technologies to evaluate whether it makes sense to look into this or not. So therefore, usually start there. Then we see two types of or three types of engagements. So one is really on the research side. So some institutions just need help to understand what's the landscape. So really doing kind of research on the area in general, on the hardware, on the applications, and general getting an overview because they just don't have the time to do it themselves. So the second part is really on strategy, as Niklas was saying, like, okay, really evaluating what does it mean for my business model? Is there any kind of use case? Not every bank is engaged in capital in front office trading activities. You know, we have a lot of institutions who are engaged in retail payments and stuff like that. So it's questions, is it something for them? So really kind of strategy work. And then the third type of engagement is really what Niklas is saying, like, can we find one of the use case and really do something practically, just doing a POC, working with a small team to evaluate? Because I think there are a lot of smart people in financial services, a lot of physicists, a lot of mathematicians. I mean, the risk department consists of a whole range of scientific, very experienced people. So I think, but we need to bring, and that's what Stefan was saying, on this quantum thinking, because the way how you need to think is different to the way how we currently think when we develop algorithms on classical computer. And I think that's still a part which is needed. And then, of course, startups can help, and the solution providers and ourselves as well, because just a little bit on our experience. I mean, we also need to beef up on quantum computing as an auditor. So, I mean, we need to audit these type of models. That's part of our daily job. We need to be able to understand what the financial service institutions are doing. I mean, as I said in my talk, a lot of stuff on the risk side is highly regulated, and it's usually audited by us or by other auditors. So we also need to understand these algorithms. We also, as EY, need to understand how to program them. Otherwise, how can we audit them? So it's also for us. So we're also on this journey. It's not just that we help others. It's also we're on our own quantum journey.
And thank you very much, Jan. I think, having said that, I would like to encourage the audience to write us a couple of the last questions, because we are coming closer to the end of the event. And on the last point that you have mentioned, I think if I could reconnect some of the words mentioned before, the ecosystem, the cooperation, I think that the work that we are doing together with IBM, Tequaterius, Quantum, and now also the other guests that we have here today, is a showcase about how these learnings, how this knowledge could be spread or could be developed even together if we work as an ecosystem. And I believe that it will be great also to have Peter Noy's point of view on this. But before we jump into this point, that I think it would be good to leave for the end, maybe one question for Professor Wolf. And this question goes a little bit outside of the use case or the specific use case. And it's a question that we hear a lot in the field, especially when comparing the investments. We heard from Professor, the minister, senior minister earlier on, that Essen is a state where actually the investments will come, the investments are coming, there is the interest to do that. But if we see how fast other regions are moving, it's kind of threatening, I would say, or even I could say inspiring, if you would like to see this in the positive way, considering the amount of investments that are put into this. Could this be an additional point to take into consideration when talking about the run to quantum computing? And what will happen if we don't manage to reach that stage and defend the financial systems that we have here in Germany, especially in Frankfurt?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Maybe let me comment on it. So at the moment, worldwide, there's there are huge amounts of money being poured into quantum computing. So there are several national programs and also international programs. For example, the European Union has a program worth 3 billion euros, and other countries have spent similar amounts. For example, Japan spends around 1 billion, Canada also around 1 billion, the US more than 1 billion. So billions are flowing into this area, and so we can expect I would like to maybe return to a comment made by Jan Rosam about actually finding people who are qualified to do all the work that we are funding. So I think we also need to invest on training substantially. Otherwise, we will have the money but not the people to hire. And I think those with an education in quantum computing, they can be very lucky. They will probably not have trouble finding a new position. And also the, let's say, market is growing very fast. So it's a little bit hard to measure the exact market right now, but it's probably of $1 million, and so the growth rate is tremendous. It's so there are different projections that name growth rates of like two-digit percentage growth rates. So we can expect this field to become much wider, and all the cross-fertilization between the different players also makes it makes it a very dynamic field. And I would expect that we will probably in just a few years the situation will be very different from today. And I think it's maybe so investing in the investment in quantum computing today might seem like a large investment, but so a few years later, probably many will think, had I invested more in quantum computing, I would be
Let's let him finish. So.
Very good. Thank you very much for this answer, Professor Wolf. And I really look forward to this larger amounts of investments coming up, and this change in the field that hopefully will push even more the use and development of the technology. We're coming closer to the end, even closer than before, I would say. And before we wrap up and end the event, I would like to give the chance to Peter for a few final remarks. So, Peter, please.
Yeah, thank you, Francesco. I really would like to thank the speakers for this contribution, also the audience for listening to this. It was really deep contents. Yeah, I'm really impressed. Being myself a physicist, Stefan, I know what I now do over the weekend. Yeah, and we also talked deeply about use cases, and this was the intention to have here a community. And it really shows the importance of the community, and we only can bring this topic further and bring it to success in the real economy if we form the community, find use cases, and then come together and speak about it. Yeah. So please, and the TechQuartier is happy to be a part in this. Yeah. So please let us know your views. We will continue this discussion on quantum computing. Yeah. In this context, and we will also extend this format to other topics which are hot and important, like ESG, supply chain, open finance, or crypto. Yeah, so please stay tuned with TQ and in this community. And thanks a lot to you guys for really providing this content. This is Francesco. The last words are to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for these words. And then the final remarks. Stay tuned. I would say these are the last two words that I would like to leave to all the audience or the parties that we have in the audience. And last but not least, also from my side, thank you all to all the speakers that we had today, Professor Wolf, Dr. Stefan Kister, Mohammed, and Nicholas, as well as you, Peter, and Jan. I think that it was indeed a great event that we had today with a lot of insights, but more are yet to come. So as Peter said, stay tuned. and we'll talk to each other very soon. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.